Hello everyone. Good evening. How are you guys doing? Hope you guys are doing good. So excited to see so many people. First things first. Kindly keep yourself on mute. You can keep your videos on. That's up to you. But kindly keep yourself on mute. You can raise your hands if you want to say something, and I can ask you to unmute and then you can talk. That's actually that will be useful for the entire class, right? If everyone starts talking at once, it'll be very difficult to manage. We have around 50 people. We'll just give it one more minute and get started. Meanwhile, we just wait a minute. I'll also quickly start sharing my screen and see if folks are able to see my shared screen. 1 second. Okay. If you can see my screen that I've shared, give me a thumbs up or yes on the chat, please. Okay, I see one. Pratik, Prantik saying visible. Yes, yeah. I see most of the people are saying yes. Yeah, I think it's yeah. I think yeah. Thanks, guys. I think you can see my screen, and I think we can get started, right? So again, folks, good evening. I'm Vikram Santhalia. For those who don't know me, I have been working on web development for past 14, 15 years now. If I add my college days too. Mostly I used to do these kind of stuff rather than going to classes. I see people from college also here. Please don't do that. So some of you can't hear. Can everyone not hear? There are folks who to whom I'm audible. So please, I think there's some issue at your end. Please try and fix that. Cool. Yeah, so as I was trying to tell about myself, I have been doing web development for some time now. I I passed out of college from 2012, and from that time, I have been into core web development and front end. From the time that it was not so posh also to do front end development, and it was not so exciting to people in the industry. Did not acknowledge front end development that much. Uh, Although now the times have changed, front end development is very real right now, and there's a lot of buzz and a lot of opportunities in front end development. uh, what I have been doing for last 12, 13 years is basically, I started with a couple of startups. Then I worked in Flipkart for 3 years, 3 to 4 years, and then I've been in Google for last 5 years. I'm a UX engineer in Google. We could do a separate topic of on what a UX engineer is, but I'll not go deep into it. What we are doing today is basically getting you started with CSS, and it's not just one class. I'll be doing a series of classes. It'll be 1 hour sessions only. We're keeping it short. We're keeping it concise so that you're able to focus in that one session. We're trying to have good assignments for you in every session so that you can get do that assignments, and make sure that you have made your learnings very concrete. Okay, that's the intention of it. We will try and be focused in the class. I'll take questions. If we don't have time to take questions now, we'll take it offline. Maybe if there are way too many questions, we'll try and take them in an office hour separately, right? Before that, yeah, all said and done. Let me get started. Uh, so, also to call out, there'll be some of you who might know parts of it, because I'm starting from absolute basics. You can, feel free to skip if you see some section that you know of. But I'm pretty sure that this is, I've culminated my knowledge of over 14, 15 years of doing web development into these series of talks and chats and classes that I'm going to do with you. So I'm pretty sure that you'll find something or the other new in the class that we're going to do. So before wasting much time, let me just quickly dive into it and get started. Okay. Also, I'll try and keep it interactive. So I'll at times in between ask you people to raise hands and answer me something. So please start raising hands and start answering. If I don't see people raising hands, I just feel like I'm talking to just pictures, and that's the reason I don't like doing YouTube videos, because I feel that the live class is more exciting. Okay. So let's get started. What is CSS? Who can just raise hands and tell me what is CSS? Yes, Prantik. Nice name. Tell me. Unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
thanks. So CSS is like its full name is Cascading Style Sheet.
Mm-hmm.
It's used for styling HTML mainly. HTML is the structure and CSS is the styling. For example, if we have a car, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the car has wheels, it has like axle. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the HTML, and the body. Now the body coloring, how the body could look like, is done by CSS. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Prantik. So basically, right, he was right, right? So what is CSS? So CSS is like, your colors of the painter. As a painter, you have the brush and you have your canvas, and you start drawing with that, and you can use your pencil to draw the sketches, but you need your colors to bring them to life. And that's what CSS is. It's the visible layer of your website. It's everything related to the visual aspects of your website is CSS, right? Another thing that is very important to note here and to understand is that CSS is just like HTML and JavaScript. It is also a programming construct, right? A lot of times people, think of CSS as just set of rules, or just something that they need to mug up, and they would write it out in some file, and that is supposed to magically work. I also used to think like that when I had started, maybe 14, 15 years back, but it's not like that. What is important to understand is that it's a programming language. It is interpreted by the engine in the browser, like JavaScript. Like in JavaScript, you write a for loop, and the browser engine that's running, V8 engine, that will interpret it, that will read it, and it knows that there is a meaning for that syntax that you've written for blah blah blah. Similarly, your CSS is read by the engine, and the browser will make sense of it, of every word, every letter that you write, and it will try to interpret that and try to use that to
CSS वर
render.
एक हे होतं.
Yeah. Please mute yourself and only raise hands if you have any concerns. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, where was I? Yeah, so basically, CSS is. Sorry, I lost complete track of what I was talking about. Okay, so basically, what is CSS is your visual or visual layer of what you're talking about, and as I was saying, that like any other programming language, CSS is also interpreted by the browser, right? And that is very important to understand. You need to understand that when you write margin blah blah blah, when you write background color blah blah blah, it's not magic. It's the set of rules that will be understood by the browser, and a browser will use that clue or that syntax to render your screen. And that is why it is important to understand the basic, understand the core, and understand how actually browsers work and how actually CSS is interpreted, right? you should, there is no harm in using a bootstrap or a tailwind or any other, CSS library framework. You should definitely use them if it makes sense. But that doesn't mean that you will become a good front end developer if you don't understand CSS. CSS is as important as JavaScript and HTML, right? If you're not able to present the information the way user best understands it, you'll not be able, your website will not be able to express that, right? And that is what CSS does, and that is why, it's very important for you as a front end developer when you're writing CSS to understand what you're writing. And once you start developing that intuition, all of this becomes very easy to you. Okay. If you've heard, if you think that you need to mug up CSS, you don't need to mug up CSS. You need to understand the concepts, and as you start applying, as you start practicing those concepts, it becomes better for you. Okay. So you understood that CSS is, and CSS is cascading style sheet. We'll go to this term cascade maybe in some of the other class where I teach you actually what does cascade mean in terms of CSS and how is it important. But otherwise, just understand that CSS is used for the visual appearance of your website. Okay. So let's move on. So you know what? Even if you don't use CSS, your website, you can still view the website, right? You can still view the HTML content, and there'll be some basic styling that each browser does on its own, right? But it's the CSS that you add on your HTML to make sure that you present the information the way you want it. Okay. Let's quickly jump onto the terminology. Uh, you might consider this as something as boring, but because it starts coming to you so much, so much through the class, so much while you're working, that it's important for you to grasp immediately when you see something, that what is the terminology when you break it down. It's very simple. We'll go over it very, very quickly. Okay. So what's a selector? Okay. Now in this, can someone raise hands and tell me in here, whatever code that you see on the screen, what's the selector here? Raise hands please and tell me what's the selector here quickly, and what do you see on the screen? Yeah, raise hands and tell me. Yeah, yes, thank you. Should Sendu? Yes, we can't hear you. Yep. Sorry, we can't hear you. Anyone else who wants to tell me what's the selector here? Okay, that's okay. A lot of you have to. Okay, Aniket, unmute yourself. Tell me. Yes, Aniket, you raised your hand. No, you don't want to unmute yourself. It's okay. So basically, the dot container that you see, that's actually a selector. Okay. What does a selector means? A selector is a way by which you actually target a HTML DOM element to style it. Okay. Now, when we say dot, it means a class selector. We'll jump into the code and we'll also see it in practice. But just quickly check it out. So basically, you can use other selectors. We'll go over selectors in the next class as well. Right now, please understand that whatever you write before this curly braces is called the selector. Okay. Then this margin colon zero auto and then a semicolon, this entire thing is a declaration. Okay. Our declaration is made up of a property and a value. So margin here is the property and zero auto is the value. Okay. Now font size is another property and the value is 16 px, and the px that you see is units. There are a lot of other units: px, rems, ems, percentages, ch. All these are different units. We'll talk about units also in one of the classes. But basically, just understand that when you say 16 px is the unit that's being used here. What's the rule? Multiple declarations inside a curly braces when used with a selector is called a rule. So basically, this entire thing that you see here is one rule. Okay. So if I quickly go over again, this entire block is a rule. Font size, box sizing, margin is a property. After the colon, whatever comes, that's a value. There are several units that are used in CSS. One of the most common units is pixels that you see here. Okay. And yeah, and a property and a value together forms a declaration. Okay. So to quickly make your understanding super solid, let's quickly do a quick exercise, and that will make our knowledge super solid. Oh, cool. So here you have this piece of CSS code that's written. Can someone quickly raise hands and tell me how many rules are there in this piece of code? Quickly, please. Raise hands, no chat. Please raise hands and tell me. How many rules here? Don't be so shy. Please raise hands and tell me. Yeah, Aurobindo.
Yeah, there are two rules.
What is the first rule?
The container in which the margin zero auto and box sizing.
Yes, thank you. So let's go with the first question. What's the second rule? Someone raise hands and tell me. Let's go at this in a jiffy. Let's do it very quickly. First question. Answer the first question. What's the second rule? Don't worry about being wrong. It's okay. We learn by being wrong. Raise hands. Someone raise hands. If you don't raise hands, I'll start calling names. Come on. There's 69 people. Yes. I'll ask Arbindo again. Yes, Arbindo. Tell
Yeah,
me.
so second rule is the header hero text and H3 hero text.
Yeah, and that's not the rule, right? The entire thing is a rule.
Yeah, the entire thing. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. That's the rule. Okay. Second question. What is the selector used for the second rule?
Yeah, the selectors used are the H3 dot hero text and the header hero text.
Yes, and the point to note here is there are two selectors that are being used here. In the first rule, we only have one selector, and in the second rule, we have two selectors which are separated by comma. What does that mean? Is any HTML element which can be targeted with this rule or with this rule, all this CSS declarations will apply to all of those elements. Okay, that is why here you have two selectors. Third question, what is the second declaration of the first rule? Yes, Mega. Thank you. Tell me. Mega, please unmute
Box
yourself.
box sizing is the second declaration of the first rule.
You're not entirely correct. So
Okay.
declaration is property and value. So this entire thing is your declaration. Okay. Box sizing
Okay.
is your property. Border box is the value, and this entire thing is called the declaration. Okay. Thanks, Mega. Fourth question. What is the last declaration of the second rule? Quickly. Yes, Shishendu. Hopefully we can hear you now.
The padding colon one RN
Yes,
semicolon.
one RAM. It's called one RAM.
One rem.
We'll understand what is RAMs when we learn about CSS units. Okay, RAM is a unit here. Okay, so this is right. This is the declaration of the second rule. Fifth question: what is the unit used in the last declaration of the second rule? Yes, Aniket.
rem,
Yeah, I already said it. It's the RAM that is used. What is the selector used for the first rule? Yes, raise hands. Yes, Mega.
Dot container.
Yes, dot container, and dot containers means all the HTML elements which have a class called container will be targeted by that dot container, and these couple of declarations will be applied to all of those HTML elements. Okay, where was I? Sixth question. Seventh question. What is the property used for the last declaration of the second rule? What's the property? Yes, Sumit.
padding,
Exactly. So this is so. What was the question? What is the property used for the last declaration of the second rule? So this is the second rule. This is the last declaration, and this is your property. Now, what is the value for the second declaration of the first rule? Quickly. What is the value of the second declaration of the first rule? Yes, Zabullah.
Border box.
Yes. So basically, this is your first rule, and sorry, this is your first rule, and this is the declaration. Sorry, what was the question? Eighth question, right? What is the value for the second declaration of the first rule? Yeah, and that's border box. Border box is the value for the box sizing property here. Thank you. What is the unit used for the first declaration of the first rule? Who will answer this? Yes, Shishendu.
No unit. Auto.
No unit or auto. What is
No
your answer? It could be only one.
unit.
Okay.
No unit.
Okay, Bharat, do you have to say anything? Do you
No
think
unit.
Shishendu is right or wrong?
It's no unit.
Yes, thank you. So basically, there are some values which are also keywords. Auto here is a keyword, okay, and zero that you see here, that's actually interpreted as 0 pixels by the browser. Okay, we'll get to all this slowly. Okay, and this is right. There was no unit in the value of the property of the first declaration of the first rule. Okay, I hope you guys have understood this, and now it's super clear what's a declaration, what's a rule, what's a property, what's a value. Cool. Let me move on. Okay, now let's see how are the styles added to a web page. Okay, so there are three ways by which you can add styles to a web page. So let me quickly open a code sandbox and quickly let me show you. So hold on, I've not signed it. How do I not signed it here? Let me quickly sign in. Don't even remember. Let's see. Awesome. Cool. So what you see here is a simple HTML. Okay. Don't fret too much about what is the script and all that. Okay. We just have a simple HTML, and here we have this heading tag, and here we've written hello CSS world. Okay. Cool. That's all. And let us actually, what else we are doing here is actually just remove this from here. We actually don't need it. Okay. Okay. So there is no styles, there is no JavaScript attached to this HTML file. It's a simple HTML file that just has a H1 inside body. There is no CSS added to this. Okay. Now let's add inline CSS to it. When you say inline CSS, what you do is basically in the HTML file itself, in the element, you can just add a style attribute equal to, and whatever property value you want to write, you can just write it and it'll start applying. You see there the inline style that we added, hello CSS world, and that style started getting applied. So this is called adding styles in an inline way. Okay, now how do you, what was next? So next is an internal style. Internal style is where, in just a head, you can just add this style tags here, right? And then you can write your rule here. Okay, so let's write a rule for the h1. H1 is the selector. There is no dot because it's directly the element selector. Don't worry about it. When I talk selectors, I'll talk about all those. So we are selecting the h1, and what do we say? We say that turn the color to dark green. Okay, hopefully that works. Okay, so the color changed to dark green. Let me change some other color. Let's change it to magenta. Okay, so this is how you add an inline style. Okay, now how do you add an external style? External style means that the style doesn't reside in this particular HTML file. You are adding a style from outside. Now this could be CSS file from a library, or this could be a CSS file that you have yourself written. Okay, so how do you do that? Is basically you start by writing a link tag. Inside the link tag, you first tell the browser that what's the type of this link. So you can add style sheets, you can add scripts, all of this using the link tag, right? And this takes an attribute called type, and you need to tell that this is of type text CSS. Mostly you'll always include a text file. Then you need to give a property called rel. Rel is actually, this attribute means the relation. Okay, so what is the relation of basically this link with, so basically this rel attribute specifies that the style sheet file will be loaded into current page, and what is the relation of the href with this HTML file. Okay, so what you define here, you say that it's a style sheet. Just say it's a style sheet. Okay, and now you give a property called href, where you actually give the link to the style. So okay, so let me quickly, if I have a link to some style file directly, let me try to add that here and see if it works. Okay, so we've added some style. Yeah, so you guys saw that of course the color didn't change. Whatever this style might be adding, it's added, and the font family did change. Earlier it was a different font, and now once I added this style, the font changed. Let me actually just comment it out so that you guys see the difference. Okay, and let me just refresh it. It'll go back to the default font, not used by whatever style that I added. Loaded. See, so that was difference. I'll also show you quickly to add a file that's there that I'll add. So what I'll do is, inside the source I have this styles.css. So what I'll do, I'll put source and I will put styles.css here. Okay, and inside my styles file, I have I have already a rule written which says h1 is equal to dark green. I can change it to, let's say, dark blue, and the color will change to dark blue. See, so this is how you add styles to your website. Hopefully this is clear. So there are three ways you add styles: this inline, internal, and external. Now, when to use what? When do you use an inline style? When would you use internal? And when would you use external? Can someone tell me when would you use an inline style? Or when would you not use an inline style? Does anyone have an answer to this? Folks who are already working, who are working on CSS, any clue? When would you add? Okay, anyone who has used inline styles, raise your hands. I'll not ask you, just raise hands if you've used inline styles. Okay, couple of folks have raised hands. Okay, three people have raised hands. Yeah, someone, yes, Sayed is saying that maybe you use inline styles for the highest preference. You're probably right. One of the reasons, Sayed, uh, because inline styles are given the highest preference. Don't fret about, again. Don't worry about what is highest preference and all. Cascading is what decides highest preference, and I'll talk about highest preference and how the preference is decided. So you guys can keep your hands down, and folks who want to tell me when would you use inline styles? Anyone? When would you not use inline styles? Good one, Dheeraj. In email development, inline styles are used. Nice. Why? Do you know the answer to it? Why? Dheeraj, do you know the answer why?
No, sir.
Inline styles.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. No.
might be because of tables and all. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No worries. So okay, so let me first tell you. So first thing is that you should avoid using inline styles. Okay, so this is my first statement. Now, why should you avoid using inline styles? So basically, inline styles are not scalable, right? So if you had to write inline styles Imagine you had, hundreds of DOM elements. It's very common to have 500 600 DOM elements. If you had to write inline styles, it's absolutely not scalable, it's absolutely not a maintainable code, right? Because there could be a lot of elements which you want to style the same way. All the headings in your uh, website, you might want to style them the same way. All the buttons in your website, you may want to style them in the same way. So if you have, 8 to 10 declarations for a button, and you start writing it for all the button, does it make sense? No, right? That's not programming. Programming is where you create building blocks of reusable part of the code, right? And that is why you should avoid inline CSS. You should probably, you would not write style equal to blah blah blah, something like that. If you know that you will have multiple headings, maybe you can just give a class like this and say that, heading or something like that, and then apply all the declarations for heading in that class, okay, in some external CSS, right? Or you could just target directly the elements also. Again, when to use class, when to use h1, we'll probably keep discussing as we go over the classes. But right now, just remember that basically, ideally you would not use inline CSS because of separation of concerns also. You what is separation of concerns? You want to keep your HTML coding separate from your styles, right? You don't want to mix them, and that's why you would probably not use inline styles. You would want to create repeatable building blocks, and that you'll keep your styles separately. Okay. When do you use inline styles? Maybe sometimes I'm not even sure of why would you necessarily need to use inline styles. Maybe, in some DOM element which, you've been adding temporarily, and you need some different style which is not gonna be reused anywhere. You might maybe wanna add it there. Otherwise, or maybe, try to Google, try to find out and see what is the use case of inline styles, and tell me, or tag me and tell me why would you use inline styles. Most likely, just remember, for separation of concerns, and also to make sure that your code is maintainable in a long run, you'll not have inline styles, you'll keep them separate, right? Now the next part is basically your inline styles. If you'll add a style tag here, and then you'll add your styles in the head of the HTML itself. Again, nothing wrong with doing that, but again, you would not want to bloat your HTML file. You would try to keep that separation of concerns, and that is why you would probably not add your styles in the HTML itself, right? You would want to create separate files. As soon as you start creating a mid-size, large-size applications, you'll have multiple styles, huge styles, right? And that's why you will not keep it in your HTML. You try and keep it separately. Folks who work on React might be thinking, we keep our styles of the template of the JSX in the same file. That's totally different. That's not inline style. That are styled components in React. Okay, so don't get confused. Those are not actually inline styles, or those are not actually internal styles as well. So the most common way of styling or adding styles to your website is actually external styles. You will add third party styles also externally, and what you need to remember is your style files which you would keep them below all the third party or external style files, so that your styles which come at the bottom override any styles that might have been added by a third party. Okay, again, we will discuss this more when we learn about cascading, and how, if there are multiple styles that are added to one element, how does the browser figure out that which particular declaration needs to be applied to that element. Okay, hopefully this is clear how you add styles to an HTML. I'll quickly move on. Okay, now how are styles loaded? You've understood that how do you add styles, but let's try understanding how are the styles loaded on a website. Okay, cool. So let's check this diagram out very quickly. So what is this diagram? This diagram is a very simplistic. First thing you should remember is that this is not a very comprehensive diagram. A lot of things happen while your web page is loading, but this is a very simplistic representation of what happens when you hit a URL google.com, and when your HTML starts coming, your browser starts receiving the files, and how your final web page is rendered on the website. Okay, so you see here, first your HTML starts loading. As soon as your HTML starts loading, your the browser starts parsing the HTML. What do you mean by parsing the HTML? What do you mean by parsing in general? Parsing means it starts going through the code one by one, line by line. It starts going through the HTML, HTML head, body, all the tags, and then it starts creating DOM. You've heard DOM so many times, document object model, right? This is what browser starts doing first. It will start creating the DOM tree, right? Where it will attach each of the element with a to a node, and then any nested element goes in as leaves or branches of that tree. So that is what browser starts doing. While it's creating the DOM tree, it will start loading the CSS. Okay, it'll start loading the CSS files. Also, you need to remember that CSS and HTML are render blocking. Let me talk about it after I finish this diagram. So now the styles are getting loaded. The browser has started downloading and it started loading. Once the styles or the CSS, all the CSS is loaded by the browser will start parsing the CSS. Now, parsing the CSS has two important phases. The first phase is cascade. Now, cascade is basically you have a heading. Browsers by default will also add some style to the heading. You might use some third-party library which has some style for the H1. You might write your own styles where you say that the H1 is supposed to look like this, right? In the end, by the cascade process, browser will figure out that which particular declarations will need to apply. There might be different conflicting declarations. Browser will figure out by the cascade process, and we'll learn more about the internals of the cascade process, that how actually this cascade process works, and how browser is actually able to decide which declaration to actually apply to the element. Once the cascade is done, it understands that what is the declaration that needs to be applied, or what are the rules that need to be applied to this particular element. The next thing is the final value processing. Now you can give the values as auto, you can give the values relative, right, 100% and so many things. But the browser finally needs to figure out that what the final value would be in terms of pixels, the final absolute value, 100 pixels, 103.2 pixels, that it needs to render. It needs to figure out that value. That is the process. That process is called the final value processing. This is how the parsing of CSS is complete. Once the parsing of CSS is complete, it creates a CSS object model, also called CSS OM. Right? CSS object model is pretty similar to what document object model is. It's also like a tree where you have each of the element, and the style information for each of these elements are attached to these nodes. The same way you'll create, the browser creates the nested nodes and leaves and branches. When the CSS object model is created, document object model is already created. Browser combines these two and creates a render tree. Now the render tree, understand, it is also the same. You have head, you have body. Inside body you will have different divs. Inside each div you will have some elements. And now, because the CSS object model and DOM both are combined, each of these elements have the style information also attached to it. So the rendered tree will be a combination of DOM and CSS object model, the CSS rendered tree. And finally, there'll be a visual formatting model that the browser will apply. So browser will know which device the user is accessing it, right? It could be a mobile browser, it could be a large screen, it could be a laptop screen, right? Which OS. Browser knows all the information. What's the actual platform and uh, uh, browser version and all the things, And in the visual formatting model, browser actually calculates using the flow layout. Whatever you've used for laying out your elements, by default it will be the flow layout. You could use the float layout or the flex layout or the grid layout. There's 7 layouts. We'll go through a couple of them in this series, so there, this position absolute and fixed and relative and all those things, and that you might have heard or you might have not heard. If you've not heard, don't worry about it. So all these things, all this information will be used by the browser to use the render tree and then finally paint or render the website on the screen as you see it, right? So the simplistic version of this is also, something that you need to understand carefully, right? I'll quickly go over it again. Browser loads the HTML. Once the HTML is loaded, it starts parsing the HTML and creates a document object model tree. Then while that is the tree is being constructed, the DOM tree is being constructed, browser starts loading the CSS. Loading of CSS, once it's done, parsing starts. Parsing has two phases. First phase is cascade, where browser figure out that what are the conflicting declarations and which is the declaration that will need to apply to each of the elements, and then it processes the final value and creates the CSS object model. Combining the DOM and CSS object model, browser creates a render tree. On the render tree, it applies the visual formatting model, which takes into account which layout, what position, what platform, everything, and then renders or paints the final website on the screen. Okay. I also talked about that CSS is render blocking, and uh, even HTML is render blocking. What do you mean by render blocking? So render blocking means that till your HTML and CSS are loaded, you don't see anything on the page, and that makes sense, right? Till your HTML is loaded, you cannot do anything on it, right? So what's the point of the browser loading? Now, the second part is interesting. Till the CSS is also loaded, the browser will not render or paint your web page. And why is that so? Let me give you an example. So this is the Google's news website. Okay, I will do something fishy very quickly. Let it give a warning. That's fine. So don't worry, I'm not doing anything fishy. I just want to show you guys something. Let me quickly show you. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm just copy pasting some small JavaScript code, and for folks who want to understand what this code is doing, what is doing, it is selecting all the styles on this website and just removing them. So if I do that, please unmute yourself and raise hands if you have to say anything. So you see, I've removed all the styles. Maybe some inline styles might be still applying, but all the external styles have been removed by this piece of code. And you see, this is the Hamburg icon. Let me open this so that you can see this. You would give the height and width to all these icons and all, and because I removed all the CSS, these icons are looking so huge, and all these animations and briefing. There's no styles applied here, right? And and you know and that's the reason why browser blocks web page to be loaded without CSS. This website is pretty much unusable without adding any sort of CSS, right? And that is the reason CSS is render blocking. Although you might ask me a question that why is CSS render blocking? My web page, my first page might need very small CSS information, but what you are doing, and I might be adding certain third party libraries, certain CSS code that I've written that only needs to work for for printable web page, or only needs to work for a small screen size. So why am I opening it on a desktop and all my CSS has to load before my web page can load, right? That's by design, but you can, as a developer, do certain things to make sure that your web page is loaded very quickly. The first thing is to basically load your first CSS as soon as possible. Okay, and when you do that, you use CDN, you have a very smaller CSS file, so that the browser is able to load your first CSS very quickly. Once your page is interactive, once your CSS is loaded, what you can do is you can load your other parts of CSS later. There are also ways where you can actually specify on the link tag itself, you can specify the media attribute, which tells that load this CSS only when the media is print or something like that. So if you see this code sandbox, you could actually add an attribute here, called media is equal to, let's say, print. So this actually gives the browser information that you don't need to load this, or you don't need to block rendering of this web page always. Block it only when media is print, right? You can go back, there are other properties also, other attributes also that could be added to this link tag. Learn about them and tell me if you've learned something new that you didn't know before. Okay. So this is mostly what it is. We If we do a quick recap, we learned what is CSS, we learned the terminology, we did a quick exercise, we actually learned how what are different ways by which we can add styles to a web page. We also learned how web page is load how styles are loaded on a web page, and we also learned CSS is render blocking and why is CSS render blocking. Okay, now folks who want to attend the next class as well. So the next, I'll tell you a bit about the next class. So next class most likely will be having it next week. We want to give 1 week's gap between each of these classes. Uh, and in the next class, we'll talk about all the most common CSS properties. Okay, this will give you a good head start. We'll talk about box shadow, border radius, what are different ways you can add colors. You can use hex colors, RGB, HSL, and all that different things. We'll talk about that. We'll do some coding. We'll build something in the class itself very quickly, and then you will do an assignment using the same properties. A very short assignment. Don't worry too much about it. Okay. So, oh, Ravi has a question. Is DOM has nothing to do with styling part? Ravi, can you raise your hands, unmute yourself, and explain your question to me? I didn't get your question.
Yes, so hi. So my
Yeah,
question
hi.
is actually, when we pass the HTML, I mean read it when the browser reads this. So as you
Mhm.
explained, first part is like loading as CSS, and second one is like document object model. I just want to understand how it happens simultaneously. Like it's also creating DOM part, and at the same time it also loading it. That part I want to know.
Yes. So basically, while it is the browser is creating the document object model, meanwhile it's also loading the CSS. Once it's done with creating the document object model and all the CSS is loaded, then it goes to the next part, which is the parsing of the CSS. Okay. Okay, I'll take couple of more questions or whatever questions you have after I explain you the assignment. Let me quickly explain you the assignment for this class. It's a very quick one. Don't worry too much. It's a very easy one too. Where is the assignment? Let me quickly find it and share it with you guys, and I'll explain it and then share it with you guys also, so you don't have to worry about it. But first let me quickly find it. Yep, got it. Cool. So I'll be sharing this with you. What you need to do here, what you see here is you have some HTML code here. It's a working code. You can copy it and paste it in your in some file, and open that HTML file in your Chrome browser, and you'll be able to see some output. Okay. Now the first part is that there are some inline styles here. What you need to do is identify all the inline styles, remove the inline styles, and you need to add internal style with all these. Okay. So what you need to do, copy this HTML, remove all the inline styles, and add internal styles which add all the styles that are written here in inline styles. Okay, so nothing should miss here. Feel free this to add. This could be like your personal website. You can add some information here, whatever you like. You can add your name, you can add pictures as well. If you even don't know, just Google how to add an image in a HTML. Okay, and you can start adding, you can start beautifying it. You can actually, once you add it, actually, you know what, let me show it to you. You can also quickly host it on GitHub. Okay, so if I can show that to you, let me try to do that. Hopefully I'm logged in. Yes, I'm logged in. Yeah, okay. So see, what I did, what you need to do on GitHub, you can go, you can just create a simple repository. This is a repository that I created. I added one file in it, only one file. This is your index HTML. That's it. And I didn't use any GitHub commands and all. I simply did it on GitHub. No command line. I simply created a file here itself, and I simply committed it here. If you don't know Git, you don't need to worry about it also. Just add this HTML file here, and then to host it, what you need to do, you need to go to settings. You need to go to this code and automation. There is this pages tab. You need to go to this pages tab, and what you'll see here, they'll be empty. You can just select your main branch or whatever branch you want to select and save it. As soon as you save it, what will happen is a deployment will start here, and this will publish your page. Okay, and then you can actually check out your published page. uh, where is the address of my published page?
It's on the right side of the table only.
Right side of who's talking?
Just like you got to the table, right? From GitHub pages.
Which
Just
table?
click on GitHub pages on the bottom, just like you. So, yeah.
On the settings itself? No?
Yeah. Visit site at the top.
Ah, exactly. So this is the site, right? It created the site.
Yeah.
This is the site. Thank you, Bante. So basically, this was the HTML that was there. This which will be given, which is given to you for the assignment. And if you just copy and paste it, this is what it is. This will, and you can, your page will be hosted here. Now, what I'm trying to ask you to do is remove all the inline styles here and add internal style, and it will look like the same thing. Now you can, what you can also do is add add more elements to it, add more information to it, try to style it. What you should do is just try to inspect these. This h1 is here. What are the styles that are getting applied here? Try adding some styles, try changing some styles here. And that's how you will be able to practice and learn more too. Okay, so what's the next part of this? So this is the first part where you remove all the inline styles, and then you try to change and try to add stuff. The next part is that add external styles. Okay, so what you need to do is basically just go to the page that you've created, and the way we have learned in the class that we can add this link tag inside the head and add an external styles. You can just start add that link and add these different css small css frameworks here, right? You can actually check out the code also, what they're doing. right? And you can add them and see the results of how your pages turn out to be. Okay. And that's the third part where you can publish these pages to GitHub. You can start tagging me on Twitter or any social media platform that you want. You can submit once you've done it. You can even, we have the WhatsApp group that I don't know if we've created, but we plan to create it and add all you people. You can just put in your assignments there to wherever you want to do it. Those who would want to attend the next class will need to have this link of assignment to join the next class. Now, why am I doing this? To make sure that you are applying your learning until unless you go back. For some of you it might be very easy, very basic, but just do it. Once you do it, it'll help you to keep yourself interested too. I was very excited to and pumped to get this first class going, and I hope that I'll be able to give a lot of more information in the succeeding classes that we do. Okay, I'll quickly take some questions that you guys might have related to this series or related to the class. First, if you have any doubts related to class, please ask me. Yes, Prantik?
Yeah, can we have the Notion page of this so that we can work on it?
Yeah, this Notion page will be shared with you guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any concerns? Any questions? Any doubts? I see a question, how long these classes will go. So basically this will be 1 hour sessions, and we will it actually depends upon how many people I see interested. If I keep seeing interest, I'll keep teaching new concepts. I do want to make sure that I put out all the basics of CSS out in public for free for anyone to understand, so that anyone if you feel like CSS is purely magic and you don't understand, anyone having the fear of CSS and don't know how things work, can attend these sessions. Yeah, recording of the sessions. We do plan to put out the recordings of these sessions, probably not just after the first class, but after maybe a couple or three more sections, we'll put out the recordings. But we'll certainly put out the recordings for sure. Anything, anyone? We're already at the 1 hour mark. Basically, I could go on and talk about CSS the entire day, and I'll not be tired at all. Some of you I know are joining from a class that where I've taught you CSS before, and I have taught I have been in class for 4 or 5 hours, so I can keep talking for a long time. But I feel that doing short focus session with a clear assignment would help you understand the concepts and grab it much more easily. Okay, because it's a good attention span for you to focus. Okay, keep practicing. I think if you don't have any other questions, I'll just end this. It was great, and I was so happy to see more than 50 folks turn out.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes, Thierry.
Thanks. The second question, that add external CSS and check results. I didn't get what are the A to I points, or like what are those links that we have seen in the Notion document?
The second part.
Yeah, like all the
Right.
links. Yeah.
Right. So these are external CSS files. Okay.
Okay.
These CSS files will have some styles. So these are kind of like libraries where they'll have some predefined styles for h1 anchor tags and blah blah blah. So what you can do is you can directly just add these external file in the HTML page that we have, and you will see that the page will start looking differently because this style will start getting added. So what you need to do is one by one you can start adding this file in the same HTML once you've removed the inline styles, and see the difference and observe them.
Okay, so everything has been declared, but just adding the external file to the HTML.
Yes, that's all.
Okay, thanks.
The styles are already written. You just changes. If you want, On top of that, you can start writing some CSS, start changing the CSS. So once you add, let's say, one of these files, you can go in your debug console panel and see what styles are now getting added by this third party, and try changing the values and see, and that's how you learn the properties.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, cool. So I'll close this now. Have a good night. See you guys. Thank you so much. Bye.